Now, back to his personal life, because subhanAllah, he was a very young man when the Prophet ﷺ passed away. So when you're speaking about the Sahaba that lived long, he lived longer than most of the companions. So he lived to see many of the tabi'een, many of the next generation. He lived to teach much. He used to hold his halaqas, he used to hold his gatherings, avoiding the entire political scene at that point. Something happens to him at the age of 70 years old. Okay, something happens to him at the age of 70 years old. He develops cataracts. Now cataracts, back then, the treatment for cataracts, actually subhanAllah, if you read it, even if you read ancient treatment for cataracts, was something called couching, which is that they would actually strike your eye with blunt force at the parts where they would see those signs, and they try to get it out of your eyes. So that was the treatment back then. They sit you down and they try to literally just hit your eye with blunt force until they can somehow crack that, right? Now one of the parts of that treatment, or one of the things that comes along with that treatment, is that you have to sit down straight, so you can't move your eyes in certain directions. So you can see where this is going. He was told by the doctor that he wouldn't be able to do sujood for 2 weeks. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said, I can't do that. I can't give up my sajda for 2 weeks. Now obviously he has udhr shar'i, he has an excuse from a sharia perspective, but he said, look, I just can't do it. I can't give up doing sujood for 2 whole weeks. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu continued to do sajda even as they tried to treat it. And subhanAllah, he went blind at the age of 7 years old. And it's really interesting because the people found out in a very interesting way. He didn't come out of his house for 2 days. And so they knew something was wrong. Masruq ibn al-Ajda' radiallahu anhu, Masruq says that the people, they walked to his home, and they walked into his home and they saw him sitting out while he was saying Alhamdulillah wa huwa yatlu wa in ta'uddu ni'matallah la tuhsuha. How beautiful is that, subhanAllah. This is how he dealt with his blindness. He was sitting and he was reciting the ayah, and if you were to try to count the blessings of Allah, you would not be able to do so. And he was saying Alhamdulillah. This is again a man of Qur'an, a man that's able to reflect on the Qur'an. When anything happens to him, he goes back to the Qur'an and he draws that inspiration from the Qur'an. And subhanAllah, here you have him once again dealing with adversity using the Qur'an. Okay? وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْسُوهَا. Even if you were to count the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you would not be able to do so. And so from that point onwards, since he was blind, he used to have his students come and they would escort him from his house to the masjid, to his durus. So he would still give his lectures, he would still give his classes, but he would have to be walked to there. And the particular student I mentioned yesterday, Wahb ibn Munabbih. Wahb ibn Munabbih, rahimahullah ta'ala. Wahb was the personal assistant of Ibn Abbas. He was the one that would go and that would take Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu through these times. And subhanAllah, he said that he never missed a moment, subhanAllah, to teach people. So someone says to him, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and he says, Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ibn Abbas responds, Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And he tells Wahb, he says, go follow that man and tell him to extend it to wa barakatuhu, to add wa barakatuhu to his taslim, so that he could get the full reward. And so he narrates the hadith about saying the difference between saying Assalamu alaikum and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. He's still very, very, very insistent on teaching the people the right way to say salam, for example, or how to get the full reward. Wahb says that one time I led him to the haram. We went to the haram because again, he resides in Ta'if, so he frequently goes to do umrah and hajj and so on and so forth. I led him to a Ta'if and he heard people that were arguing in the haram. So he went to them and he admonished them and he said to them, shall I not tell you of a people that Allah Azza wa Jal holds in a high esteem? He said, they are those whose fear of Allah has driven them to silence. Though they are not helpless, nor are they incapable, their fear of Allah has made them silence. He said, it has made them silent. So he says, busy yourselves with tasbih and do not bring your arguments to this place. And Wahb ibn Munabbih says, I never saw an argument in the haram again after that. SubhanAllah, like he stopped these people from arguing. And he said, in my lifetime, I never saw an argument in the haram again. So there was never an opportunity that he missed to teach the people and to advise the people, even in that case, even in his situation of blindness. But as he comes now to his death, he died very soon after his blindness. So he dies around the age of 70 in Al-Ta'if. SubhanAllah, there are such beautiful narrations about his death. Okay? And they're all narrated pretty extensively by Imam al-Dhahabi. They're also narrated in the books of Hadith and At-Tabarani and others. The story of the death of Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. His janazah was led by Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah is actually the son of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Okay? May Allah be pleased with them. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah. Al-Hanafiyyah is his mother. Ali is his father. A great man. And he leads the janazah of Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And subhanAllah, it was one of the biggest janazahs that was ever witnessed, because again, he maintained a love and a credibility with all of the companions and with many of the tabi'een. And just listen to this, subhanAllah, as they put Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu into his grave, there are multiple narrations that say the same thing. They say, and I'll just read it, I'll read it in Arabic first. They say, رَأَيْنَا طَائِرًا لَمْ يُرَى عَلَى خِلْقَتِهِ رَأَيْنَا طَائِرًا لَمْ يُرَى عَلَى خِلْقَتِهِ. We saw a bird that we had never seen before. دَخَلَ نَعْشَ ibn Abbas. And it actually entered into the grave of Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. وَلَمْ يُرَى خَارِجًا مِنْ. And it never came out. And so they said that فَحِينَ وَضَعْنَاهُ فِي قَبْرِ. Once we put him into his grave. So this is before they even put him into his grave. They see this bird coming and it lands in the grave of Ibn Abbas and it never comes out. So he said, subhanallah. So they said, whenever we put him into his grave and we buried him, they said, سَمِعْنَا مَنْ يَتْلُو قَوْلَ اللَّهِ. We heard a recitation. SubhanAllah, this is a person of Quran. We heard a recitation of the verses of Allah Azza wa Jal. وَلَا نَدْرِي مَنِ الَّذِي يَتْلُو. And we had no idea who was reciting. يَا أَيَّتُهَا النَّفْسُ الْمُطْمَئِنَّةِ ارْجِعِي إِلَىٰ رَبِّكِ رَاضِيَةً مَرْضِيَّةً فَادْخُلِي فِي عِبَادِي وَادْخُلِي جَنَّتِي. The last verses of Surah Al-Fajr, subhanAllah, they said, we all heard the recitation coming from his grave. O soul that is at peace. يَا أَيَّتُهَا النَّفْسُ الْمُطْمَئِنَّةِ. O soul that is at peace. ارْجِعِي إِلَىٰ رَبِّكِ رَاضِيَةً مَرْضِيَّةً. Come back to your Lord, pleasing and pleased. فَادْخُلِي فِي عِبَادِي. Enter you amongst my servants. وَادْخُلِي جَنَّتِي. And enter my paradise. Can you imagine being buried and that recitation is coming from your grave? What a sign from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah. And when that happened, Amr ibn Dinar, he says that there was absolute silence in the janazah of Ibn Abbas. Everyone just kind of looked at each other and took in what they just witnessed. Because they'd never witnessed anything like that in their lives. This is actually the only narration that I can think of a Sahabi where the Quran was being recited from his grave, where you heard, and subhanAllah, he is Tarjuman al-Quran, he's the interpreter of the Quran, he teaches this ummah the Quran. And look at this gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to him, that these ayat are recited out loud. And they said that we debated with one another about what that bird was. Some of us said that was maybe his ilm, some of us his knowledge, some of us said that maybe that was the body that his soul would enter as it went through the heavens now. The people started to debate what was that bird that went into the grave of Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he said, مَاتَ رَبَّانِيُّ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ. The Rabbani, he was, not only was he the scholar, he was the mentor, he was the teacher of this ummah. He was, subhanAllah, the great worshipper of this ummah. He was a person, subhanAllah, who could be looked to in every single aspect of his life. And he really was not just a teacher to his students, but he was a father to his students, and in many ways to the ummah as a whole. So Allah Azza wa Jal has given us a sign in this man that, subhanAllah, not only was he always reciting the Quran in his lifetime, and was he able to reflect on the Quran no matter what was going on in life, but even as he's placed into his grave, the Quran is what gives him comfort. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy upon him, to be pleased with him and to please him. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to elevate him and his father and his family, his mother, his brothers, with their cousin Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam into Jannatul Firdaus. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to join us with them. Allahumma ameen. His legacy, inshallah ta'ala, just to go over sort of how we now take from his legacy. What remains of this legacy of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu? Number one, when it comes to tafsir, the first tafsir that was ever written was not tafsir Ibn Abbas. What's known as the tafsir of Ibn Abbas is actually not his tafsir. Okay, this was a book that was written way later on and attempted to compile statements of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu hundreds of years later, and actually has a lot of fabrication. So that's not the tafsir that we're talking about. Actually, we take it back to Mujahid. Mujahid ibn Jabr, rahimahullah. Mujahid was one of the students of Ibn Abbas, and he said he went over the Quran with Ibn Abbas twice, asking him about every single ayah. So he studied the tafsir of the Quran with Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, ayah by ayah, 2 times. And so Mujahid is the first one to write tafsir. Then we find in Ibn Kathir and At-Tabari, basically, At-Tabari, which is the mother of tafsirs, At-Tabari mentions a narration of Ibn Abbas in regards to practically every single ayah in the Quran. So his memory in tafsir, or his legacy in tafsir, is left in almost all of the tafsir and all of the explanations of the Quran. You always find an explanation of Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu for practically every single ayah. As far as his students are concerned, and this is really beautiful, I mentioned this quickly, that all of his students were freed slaves for the most part. I mean, he basically would go and find slaves, he'd free them, and then he'd teach them. So Mujahid ibn Jabr, Mujahid rahimahullah ta'ala, was a freed slave from Persia. And he shadowed Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, and when Ali ibn Abi Talib died, he then went and he shadowed Ibn Abbas for the rest of his life. He's also a hadith narrator, okay, and he's considered thiqah. He's one of the most trustworthy hadith narrators. So you find many of the hadith of Ibn Abbas are narrated through Mujahid, and you can find this in all of the different sahihs, in all of the authentic books of hadith. Then you have Ikrama ibn Abdullah. Ikrama is, a lot of people mistake him for Ikrama ibn Abi Jahl, the son of Abu Jahl. Ikrama ibn Abdullah is Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He once saw him as a slave, and he noticed his good character, so he went and he bought him and he freed him, and then he taught him. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu saw his good character and he went and he freed him. Sa'id ibn Jubair radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Sa'id ibn Jubair was so great. He was one of the greatest of the tabi'een. He was so great that many of the Sahaba would not give fatwa in his presence, which is very rare to see, that a tabi'i, someone from the second generation, actually surpasses many from the first generation in his knowledge. So he's one of the students of Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he narrates many ahadith from Ibn Abbas as well. And Ibn Abbas used to actually consult him on some issues. So he's a teacher of Sa'id ibn Jubair, but Sa'id ibn Jubair is a scholar in his own right. We mentioned Tawus ibn Kaysan. Tawus ibn Kaysan was of Persian descent, from Yemen, okay, Persian descent, but grew up in Yemen. And he was the one that came and just dedicated himself to Ibn Abbas, because he realized that all of the Sahaba, when they disagreed, they just said, well, Abdullah ibn Abbas said this. This man, he did 40 hajjs in his lifetime. So he was someone that was well known for his ibadah. He would lead the salah in Al-Madinah. And he narrates a hadith from Ibn Abbas in all 6 books of hadith, in all of as-Sihah as-Sitta. Okay, so in each of those 6 books you find narrations from Tawus, from Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Finally, you have Ata ibn Abi Rabah. Ata ibn Abi Rabah is from modern day Sudan, and he was one of the students of Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He's one of the students of Ibn Omar radiallahu anhu as well, and he narrates from both of them in as-Sihah as-Sitta as well, in all 6 books of hadith. And he became the mufti of Mecca. So Ata actually assumed the position of the mufti of Mecca after the death of Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. As far as fiqh is concerned, okay, so, and that's what it is about Ibn Abbas, that he has a legacy in all of the different sciences. As far as his fiqh is concerned, the school of thought that you tend to find the most of his opinions is the school of Imam al-Shafi'i. The interesting thing here is that Imam al-Shafi'i is very similar to Ibn Abbas. I mean, his biography is very similar to Ibn Abbas, an incredibly brilliant, impressive young boy, right? Who just surpasses everyone with his eloquence, his knowledge, his appearance, and who also has incredible depth. Because if you read the tafsir of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, you always find incredible depth and perspective. Al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala is known for that. So Al-Shafi'i prefers the opinion of Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu in many ways, and so that's where you find Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu's fiqh is most contained, because the approaches are so similar. He's also succeeded by his children. He has Ali. He has a son by the name of Ali. He has his oldest son by the name of Al-Abbas. So the kunya of Abdullah ibn Abbas, his nickname, or the way he's called, his kunya is Abu al-Abbas as well. So he's Abdullah ibn Abbas, but he's also Abu al-Abbas, the father of Al-Abbas. He has a son named Muhammad, and then he named two of his sons after his brothers. So he named one of his sons Ubaidullah, another one Al-Fadl, and then he had two daughters, and he named the first daughter Lubaba. So he named his oldest son after his father, his oldest daughter after his mother, Lubaba, and he had a daughter named Asma. Okay, you'll find narrations from Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu from all of the Khulafa al-Rashideen and from all of the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's also a distinction that belongs to him radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that he narrates from all of them. Okay, and those that narrate on his behalf are many. Just some numbers here. In Sahih al-Bukhari, you'll find 594 ahadith from him. In Sahih Muslim, you'll find 321. In Abu Dawood, you'll find 361. In At-Tirmidhi, you'll find 295. In An-Nasa'i, 412. And in Ibn Majah, 325. So in Al-Bukhari, 594, in Muslim 321, in Abu Dawood 361, in At-Tirmidhi 295, and in An-Nasa'i 412, and in Sunan Ibn Majah 325. So his legacy, definitely out of all of the abadi that we're going to study, he has the most impressive of resumes, right? No one really compares to him in anything. SubhanAllah, he surpasses everyone in everything.